Okay, this is a progression video for squatting. Actually, all leg compound movements. This is just the first of several different movements. So what we're really focused on is a good barbell squat, deadlift, and power clean. I feel that the squat is the best thing to start within this progression, and then you'll see a lot of these cues in the other segments on those other lifts that are built into this and the cues from this. So start with this. And I also have common corrections basically for beginners or people who are coming back into training if they have imbalances or any issues that possibly could. I have my common, I'm not saying they're the perfect, but I have my common cues and adjustments. So first, I like starting with the body weight squat. Shoulders should be over your feet. You want everything firmly balanced in a straight line. I always cue to make sure you're in a point where you can breathe, and by meaning that, that means that your shoulders are rolled back, your intercostals, your ribs are stretched, because those are all things that help coordinate. Your belly should be relaxed and you should be able to breathe from your belly. So in all of these, this is the position we want. The first thing I say is to cue to roll your hips backwards when you start. That loosens up a lot of what individuals have as troubles when they first go down, because they're worried about not sitting down in a chair. They sit down in chairs all the time. They usually have the same musculature, but they're worried about it, so they want to go straight down over their toes. The body doesn't work in keeping in balance that way, so a lot of times you'll see this, they'll first go down like that. Having heels come up, all kinds of issues. Unhinging the hips gets them to a point to where now their chest is a little more forward, their hips are a little further back, and it's more likely like they'll sit down and hold themselves like they're holding in a chair. You want your parallel squat to be to where the top of your legs are parallel with the ground. Now, we lose this because we sat in chairs, but this, even going lower, is the natural human resting position. You'll see babies do this all the time. This is what we want to get to as the height of flexibility. This is what the goal is, and I would always start individuals with a body weight squat. If they're doing everything like this really excellently, then move them on to a barbell squat. We don't have to fix a lot of these issues. And I can even show you one more way of a body weight squat that can really help make sure individuals have everything covered, but I'll show that quick in another segment. Most common problem I see is flexibility, especially in youth. They've grown so fast, their bones have grown so fast that these segments, they haven't developed enough segments within their muscles, and their segments are extremely tight, especially in young boys. Young ladies, not as much because they're not growing the height quite as fast, but it can still occur. But it's the most common one I see. And what I see is even when they're trying to do this right and they're coming back, their bones within their shin are not flexible enough at the ankle to come far enough forward to get into this squat. So one of the first things I see with a flexibility issue is the heels pop up. Individuals are trying to get low enough, they're even in the correct form, and their heels are popping up. That tells me they're not flexible enough at that point. I also see, I'll turn a little bit so you can see this, as they're coming down, their back starts to round to create less tension in order to come low enough. Now, that is the main flexibility issues that you're gonna see kick off right off the bat, is back's going to curve so that your hips are no longer out, and as they're coming down, heels are going to come up. And when I see that, the thing is that mainly a lot of times is inflexibility at the ankle, but there could be inflexibility around muscles on the knee and inflexibility at the hips, even in their lower back. So to fix all of those issues, when I see an individual that has flexibility issues, and sometimes there can be imbalance and flexibility and issues all over the place, but this is the most common one that I see. I have one stretch that I use in order to help individuals get past that, and I try to cue them to put their foot right at the edge of the bench. Now, I want that foot to be firmly planted, right? I want them to be firmly planted at the edge of that bench, and I want that foot to stay flat the entire time throughout this. The other foot, you're gonna put a little ways back, make sure the weight's behind you, and you're just going to push with the direction with your hip, trying to go to your ankle to touch. We're going here, and notice I'm still in that spot where I can breathe. There's a lot of kids who can reach this when they round their back because it'll take tension off. But if this is a flexibility issue, we want to do it when we're in proper form. So, foot straight, their back foot needs to be straight as well. If they're not flexible, I know it's hard to see on this camera, but they'll have their foot turned in order to take some of their tension off of their groin. We want it to be straight, okay? Here, I have them hold for 30 to 40 seconds in between each set, going as low as they can on body weight squats. So we're here and we're pushing through. We have our chest up nice and tight. That's the first that I do for flexibility. Now, the next common issues that I see are imbalance, right? The imbalance issues are usually that they don't have strong enough glutes. And the most common ones I see is that as individuals are coming down, I'll pull my shorts up so you can see a little better, their knees start to come in. Okay, a lot of times bodies naturally strengthen inside, do not strengthen outside, just with our natural movement patterns, well, sedentary movement patterns that individuals usually have. So if I see knees coming in, we want to cue, some of that can be flexibility too, that can happen there. I usually try to cue them to get out a little bit wider, and that can correct it if it's just small. But the other thing that I have them do, and you can really do anything in order to help strengthen outer glutes in order to keep this, but this is the simplest way that I've found. And if it activates the muscles, a lot of times they can hold it. So they can even just do a few sets of this and get that muscle that possibly isn't firing during the workout to engage, and it'll correct it pretty quick. And then I put this in as a normal part of the routine so that it stays tight. But this is just one motion in what I call a hip circuit. I'm gonna put a 5-pound ankle weight on, and I'm gonna go nice and slow, really trying to squeeze that outer glute, and I'll do both legs that way. I can switch to the other leg and have both legs. That's the next issue that I usually see. But a lot of kids, when they're younger, they're gonna have higher hormones anyway, so a lot of times their muscles are strong enough. Flexibility is an issue, and sometimes just getting the right muscles activated is an issue, and that's where I'll get to my last point when you're correcting squats. Even with body weight squats, you'll see individuals, they're all over the place. They don't have the right motor movement patterns because they haven't practiced a squat motion enough. And the few things that I do to help with that, before ever going to a barbell squat, before I ever go to a barbell squat, the first thing that I like doing is going really light, even if it's more than a body weight squat. Sometimes it cues their body of the correct muscles, because right, if we want our lower back to be locked in and we want to make sure that the weight's over our hips, the barbell squat puts it in a position where it's already there. So a lot of individuals are going to feel, or their muscles won't naturally activate to have that happen. What I've found is that putting an individual like in a front goblet squat just with a dumbbell, so you can go lighter than the bar here, helps with that coordination and helps increase some of that flexibility, because the weight is naturally pulling forward. When you tell them to stay up straight, they're going to have to arch their back better, and then to sit back properly, they're going to have to realign their hips back. So some of these things that I've talked about the whole time end up correcting themselves by adding this weight as a cue in front of their chest. So they're here, they're going to rock back, and they're going to continue to come down to where they need to be. Again, I like going even lower. I like doing flexibility through training. Here, building up from that weight cue, when they can handle goblet squats and they're doing those right, you can build up to a front squat, placing it on their shoulders and grabbing the bar. And finally, what we've been building to the whole time, sorry I don't have my weights or my bar set up properly what we've been building to the whole time is a barbell squat. That's eventually what we want to get to, because you can overload the musculature and the nervous system all at the same time. It just does really great axial loading on the body. And that's where we would get to all of these cues, right? Our feet need to be in balance. We need to rock our hips backwards. And we need to make sure that we're sitting straight back in a spot where we can breathe, coming on up. Those are a lot of the common issues that I see and can break down, and the normal fixes that I use in order to make sure I correct all these things before I move on to something like deadlift or power cleans, because deadlift is going to change the loading pattern compared to a squat, and power clean, you're trying to change your explosiveness. So really, I see those as progressive motions on the squat, and that's where I utilize a lot of these things. One last thing on coordination, I was thinking of coordination from upper muscular area, and I had forgot to cover one other drill that I do. If coordination might be individuals not having one side or the other coordinated, they might be pushing more with one, or they might be falling forward and backwards. One other drill that I have individuals do is just a balance drill. And when they do a body weight squat, maybe after I've corrected with some cues from some weight, I have them come down and hold. They could even do a goblet squat this direction. And then I have them practice feeling their movements, feeling what happens when they lean forward with their chest and they get more on their toes, feeling themselves leaning from side to side, finding their center, and when they have that, pushing up evenly into the floor in order to make that. And I'll have them feel a couple different things. What happens when I push my butt back and my toes come up? What happens when I go side to side? Okay, now I've felt all those different directions, right? I've cued my nervous system of what out of balance is. Now I'm going to try and push evenly in balance. Those are the main adjustments and drills. You can do them in any order. You can apply them in different ways to clients as they have their needs, or individuals as they have their needs. But those are my main attack system to correct squatting form.